The movie opens with Chris, who's a clinical psychologist, trying to reschedule a session with a patient that's opted out of their meeting. Kelvin's life continues to unfold in a monotonous and solitary routine until one fateful day when his existence takes an unprecedented turn. Out of the blue, he's approached by two men who identify themselves as employees of DBA, a prominent corporation responsible for operating a space station in orbit around the mysterious planet Solaris. The two men relay a video message sent from his scientist friend Dr. Ryan. Ryan requests that Kelvin come to the station to help understand an unusual phenomenon, but is unwilling to explain further. As the video message nears its end, Ryan, with a hint of frustration and regret, confides in Chris. He expresses his desire to provide more scientific information, but cryptically reveals that there are unseen ears listening, preventing him from divulging further details. This revelation adds an air of secrecy and intrigue to their exchange, leaving Chris with a sense that there is much more at stake than meets the eye. Following the video's disruption, the two men from the DBA take center stage. With a mix of concern and urgency, they disclose to Chris that they dispatched a task force to investigate Solaris. However, as the team approaches the enigmatic planet, all communication abruptly ceased, leaving them in a state of uncertainty and concern. At this moment, Chris finds himself caught between the enigmatic words of Ryan and the unsettling news from the DBA representatives. With a sense of urgency, the men from the DBA present Chris with a proposition. They believe that if he agrees to undertake the task, he possesses a unique ability to negotiate a safe return of the people on board. He agrees to go on a solo mission and heads to Solaris, and when he arrives at Solaris, he is met with a secluded station. He sees blood leading to the hallway, and after wondering about, he finds Snow. Chris learns that Ryan had unalived himself, and most of the crew have either died or disappeared under bizarre circumstances. He's further confused when he asks Dr. Gordon what's happened, and she was reluctant to explain after saying that there was no point in trying to make him understand until it starts happening to him too. The situation is further complicated when Chris sees a young boy running through the station, and Snow tells him that the kid is Dr. Ryan's son, Michael. Chris asks how that's possible, and Snow merely replies that that's why Chris was called here. Chris then starts conducting formal interviews, starting from Dr. Gordon, and Dr. Gordon tells him that she was tasked with compiling data to assess the viability and economic potential of Solaris. Chris then asks if the doctor had run any tests in the air and water, and she tells him that it's clear of any kind of contaminant. Later, as Chris finds himself alone in his room, he drifts into a daydream where his thoughts are consumed by memories of his beloved wife, Rhea. In the solace of his solitude, he vividly relies on the enchanting moments when their paths first crossed, as well as the passionate instances that they share together. In the flashback at the party he first laid eyes on her, he recounts Ryan telling him about the mission that he just started. Ryan states that Solaris is odd in the sense that it's as if it knows that it's being observed. Startled and filled with a mix of shock and terror, Kelvin awakens to an astonishing sight. Rhea, his long-departed wife, seemingly alive and lying beside him in bed. Overwhelmed by disbelief, he gathers his wits and begins to question her, seeking reassurance that it's just not some cruel illusion. To his amazement, she responds with intimate knowledge that only she could possess, leaving him both bewildered and hopeful. Compelled to share this miraculous occurrence with the rest of the crew, Kelvin makes a move toward the door, his mind racing with a whirlwind of emotions. However, before he can take another step, Rhea's voice trembles with urgency, pleading for him to stop, and tightly shuts the door. Kelvin collects himself, then leads this Rhea into an escape pod. Filled with pain and confusion, he jettisons the pod into space. Afterward, he confides his actions to Snow to come to understand that replicas of the crew's loved ones have been miraculously appearing. Snow tells him that they all have their own visitors, and the following night, he dreams of Rhea again. Reliving the time he was first talking about marriage with her, Rhea manifests a second time, but this time Kelvin lets her stay. Rhea looks out the window and sees Solaris, and she asks if she came with him, but Kelvin tells her that she just appeared in the morning when he was asleep. Rhea's replica relives the time she found out she was pregnant and kept it from Chris. She remembers how she forced herself to have dinner with him and his friends because Kevin was mad and he felt as though she was hiding herself from him. Gradually, this version of Rhea comes to realize that she doesn't feel human, her memories actually feel artificial, and that she lacks the emotional attachment that comes with actually having lived them. Rhea's replica panics with the realization and tells Kelvin that she doesn't think she can live with what's happening. He then tells her to rest and gives her medicine, but she insists that he doesn't understand her. Freaked out, he then goes to talk to Snow, and during their conversation, Snow asks if Kelvin thinks the replicas, whatever they are, can get pregnant. Kelvin then revisits a painful memory, one that resurfaces with vivid clarity. It was the moment he discovered that Rhea had undergone an abortion without actually telling him, and it was a revelation that struck him with a profound sense of betrayal. The weight of this revelation and his reaction was unbearable for Rhea, leading her down a path of despair that tragically culminated in taking her own life. While he goes back to the room, Kelvin tells Rhea's replica that he came back for her that day, telling her that it was him that found her body. Kelvin, the replica of Rhea, Snow, and Gordon meet to discuss the situation. Gordon and Snow begin trading ideas off of each other, hypothesizing the idea of what replicas might be made of. And Snow suggests that replicas might be made of a Higgs particle. Based on Snow's theory, Dr. Gordon suggests that they might be able to disintegrate the replicas by bombarding them with a stem of Higgs antibosons. Kelvin then says that he should take their findings back to the others after testing it out, but Dr. Gordon argues that what's happening at Solaris can happen at a mass scale back on Earth. The two get into further arguments, and in frustration at Kelvin's apparent attachment to the virtual Rhea, Gordon talks about what Kelvin did to the previous replica of Rhea. An appalled Rhea abandons the meeting, and Kelvin confronts Gordon, who in turn chastises him for getting emotionally involved with something that's not actually human and may eventually pose a threat to human beings on the station and also back on Earth. Later, in what appears to be a dream, a vision of Guy Ryan materializes before Kevin. Filled with a yearning for understanding, Kevin poses the question of what Solaris desires to Guy Ryan. However, Guy Ryan hesitates, reluctant to entertain the notion of comprehending the motivations of an extraterrestrial entity, or even the possibility that it poses motivations at all. With a firm tone, Guy Ryan departs by telling Kelvin that he will die at Solaris if he keeps looking for answers when there were none. The next morning, Kelvin wakes up to find Rhea had offed herself. But a few moments later, she self-resurrects, and Dr. Gordon tells him that other replicas had died and also done the same thing. Gordon develops an apparatus which can permanently destroy a replica, but Kelvin objects to using it on Rhea, even though she tells him that she's just a replica. She also goes on to explain that she's gonna continue to off herself, as that's how he remembers Rhea being. Driven by his own grief and guilt over the real Rhea's death on Earth, he begins ingesting a chemical stimulant to stay awake in order to keep an eye on Rhea, trying to avoid the past mistake that he made, which was essentially ignoring her until she offed herself. But after Kelvin eventually falls asleep, Rhea successfully petitions Gordon to destroy her with the apparatus, as she's done with her own replicas after leaving him a video message as to why she decided to do so. Traumatized by this turn of events, Kelvin confronts Dr. Gordon, but he insists that he's just focused on preserving the humans on the station. Amidst their heated argument, Kelvin and Gordon stumble upon a shocking discovery. Hidden away in a ceiling vent within the station's cold room, they find the lifeless body of Snow. It then dawns on them that the Snow that they've been interacting with is nothing more than a replica, a mere imitation of the original. As Gordon and Kelvin confront Snow's replica, they demand an explanation for the presence of the real Snow's lifeless body. In a surprising turn of events, the replica calmly reveals that upon being dreamed into existence, he was unexpectedly attacked by the original Snow. In an act of self-defense, the replica fought back and accidentally caused the demise of the real Snow. With a heavy heart, Snow's replica continues his explanation, revealing a devastating truth. He explains that the repeated usage of the apparatus has taken a toll on the ship's fuel energy reactor, depleting it to the point where a return to Earth is now impossible. The energy required to sustain the dreams and replicas has drained the ship's vital resources, leaving them stranded in a vastness of space. Adding to their dire situation, the Snow replica reveals that amongst the alarming development, Solaris, the enigmatic planet that they orbit, has started to undergo a rapid and exponential increase in mass. This sudden growth exerts a powerful gravitational force, relentlessly pulling the space station closer and closer toward its surface. Realizing the urgency of their predicament, Gordon and Kelvin waste no time. They immediately set their sights on a smaller space vehicle named Athena, meticulously preparing it for an escape. With time running out and the threat of being consumed by Solaris looming, they work hard to ensure that Athena is ready to launch into the vastness of space, offering them the slim chance of survival. Back on Earth, Kelvin finds himself grappling with the overwhelming challenge of readjusting to normal life. Haunted by the notion that he may have remembered Rhea incorrectly, he becomes consumed by the idea that he's always remembered her as a person that wanted to off herself. This casts a shadow over every thought and action as he questions the authenticity of his memories and the nature of their relationship. The weight of this uncertainty becomes an ever-present burden, making it very difficult for Kelvin to find a peace of mind. In the midst of his struggle to readjust to life on Earth, Kelvin expresses a peculiar incident that shatters his perception of reality. While absent-mindedly handling a knife in his kitchen, he accidentally cuts his finger. To his astonishment, the wound instantly heals, and before his eyes, it leaves no trace of an injury. In this moment of bewildering realization, Kelvin's world is turned upside down. As the implications sink in, Kelvin comes to a startling revelation. He never actually returned to Earth, and the memories of his life on the planet, his struggles, their relationships, and the haunting presence of Rhea were all part of an elaborate illusion created by the planet Solaris. In a flashback, Kelvin, faced with the grim reality of the plummeting space station, makes the difficult decision to abandon the idea of boarding the lifeboat. As he watches the lifeboat depart, carrying the last remnants of hope, he is left behind. Amidst the chaos and destruction surrounding him, a replica of Giba Ryan's young son materializes, extending a helping hand to Kelvin. In this moment of utter devastation, the replica offers a glimmer of solace and assistance, symbolizing the possibility of redemption and connection even in the face of imminent destruction. In a separate encounter, Rhea appears to Kelvin once again, and this time in the kitchen. However, unlike their previous encounters, Rhea exudes a sense of tranquility and serenity. She reassures Kelvin that they no longer need to confide themselves to the limitations of concepts like life and death, and in her sincere presence, Rhea offers forgiveness, reminding Kelvin everything they have ever done is now absolved.